Hello everybody, this is Scott's Comics Retro Review. Welcome back to my channel. Well, I've done Batman before, and I'm going to do Batman again. And this time I'm going to tell you the reason I'm doing Batman is because Batman happens to be my second favorite superhero. He's just behind Spider-Man. These guys are pretty much neck and neck. I love both those characters so much. But I believe Spider-Man edges out Batman just by that much. If you could see the space between my fingers, you'll see what I'm talking about. Anyway, this channel, before I forget, is for people who are looking to get into comics and don't know where to begin, or they are buying comics currently, but they just haven't read the issues that I'm currently reviewing. And since I did a previous Batman, and the Batman was on Frank Miller's Dark Knight. And a lot of people say that that's the storyline that brought Batman back to his dark roots. And that series was wildly popular, and it's one of my favorite Batman stories. Not my only favorite Batman stories, but one of my favorite Batman stories. But it's not exactly true that Frank Miller did it. In fact, he's credited with calling Batman the Dark Knight, when in actuality, for decades, he's been called the Dark Knight Detective, except Dark Knight was just used as one word. That's, he just took it and made it the Dark Knight, you know what I'm saying, and titled it out. The person who actually, the guys who actually brought Batman back to being the creature of the night was Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil. Denny O'Neil was the writer, and Neil Adams was the artist. But Neil Adams also worked with Frank Robbins, so it wasn't just Denny O'Neil writing. But it was all mostly Neil Adams' artwork who brought Batman back to the creature of the night. So I'm going to give you a brief history of Batman. Batman started a year after Superman. What happened was, one of the editors said, look, we need to have another Superman. So Bob Kane went home and came up with the character called the Batman. And he worked on it a little bit, and then he called his good friend Bill Finger over. And Bill Finger came along and pretty much took everything except the name and threw it out. Pretty much everything that we know and love about Batman came from Bill Finger and his writings. Bill Finger was a science fiction writer. And the way the contract was set up with Bob Kane and the publishers of Batman, who back then was known as National Periodical Publications, it was set up that Bob Kane gets the sole creator. So unfortunately, for many, many decades, Bill Finger did not really get the credit he deserved for the work that he put in. But in either case, throughout the 40s, Batman was wildly popular, and he was a rather dark creature of the night. When the 50s rolled around, we had what's known as the era of McCarthyism, and we had Frederick Wertham, who wrote Seduction of the Innocent, and we had the Kavanaugh hearings, which was trying to find out if comic books were damaging to children and if it was creating juvenile delinquency through it. And of course, it was found out that that was all false, but the damage had already been done, and DC started publishing under what's known as the Comics Code of Authority. And with the Comics Code of Authority, there were certain things you couldn't do and couldn't say and couldn't do. And Batman sort of became this goofy character. And as the 50s rolled on, his sales started slipping. And even in the 60s, his sales started slipping to the point where he was actually going to be canceled. Believe it or not, Batman wasn't always the super popular character we all know him to be. Then for some strange reason, they picked Batman to make a TV series out of with Adam West. And it was a very campy and very popular one, and it drove the sales back up again. But it was a fad. It only lasted for a few years, and it started sinking again. And that's when Neil Adams entered the picture. Now, Neil Adams was an artist. I'm going to do other stories on him, and look at my Dead Man. You'll see what I did about him. But he kind of brought Batman back to that dark creature of the night. And then he left comics. And by the time I got into comics, Neil was already pretty much gone. I had seen some of his work through reprints, but I didn't really know him for Batman. I did, however, know this man from Batman. This is Marshall Rogers. And Steve Englehart wrote this. Marshall Rogers drew it. And to me, this has been the definitive Batman for the longest time until Frank Miller came along. And I was able to, between this and between Frank Miller's Dark Knight, I was able to read the Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams, Frank Robbins Batmans through reprints that DC put out. And I've come to realize that there was several definitive moments, but this was definitely one of them. Let me give you a little brief story behind this too. Steve Englehart is a writer who came from Marvel Comics, and he did some amazing things over there. I'm going to do videos on him there. And he came to DC, and he was going to write Justice League, which he did, and then he was also going to write Batman. And the way it worked out was that he was also going to leave comics completely. And the way it worked out was he teamed up with Walter Simonson, and they did this Marvel style. So in other words, Steve Englehart would write out a plot, he would send it in, and Walter Simonson would draw it, and then Steve Englehart would get back the pages and he'd fill in the dialogue, and then send it out, and Al Milgrom would end up inking it. And this was the way it was supposed to go, except it didn't work out that way for some strange reason, and things got backed up a little bit. And then Steve Englehart, because he was leaving, decided to just write full scripts. He wrote the full scripts and he left. And then at that point, the editor Julia Schwartz found this guy Marshall Rogers. And listen, no offense to Walter Simonson, I'm going to do a separate video on Walter Simonson because I love this guy. But look at how beautiful this is. And these guys created great comics together, and they never even met each other. They did, like I said, what I consider a definitive Batman, Dark Creature of the Night. And I wanted to tell you a little bit something else too. We have what's known as Batman the Animated Series, right? And they did something in there called Joker Fish, which was a very popular storyline. And just look how beautiful that is. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting my narrative here just to admire Marshall Rogers' artwork. Look at how Batman's shadow is here, and he's up here on the rooftop. Look at all of this. Terry Austin, by the way, did the inks, and Terry Austin is a phenomenal inker. I don't think I'm going to do an actual video on Terry Austin, but his name is going to pop up several times throughout the series. Anyway, in the animated series, you have the Joker's Laughing Fish. Well, it comes from this book here, which was done 20 years before that TV series. I mean, just look at that. Look at how Batman's image is in the background there. Anyway, you got the fish, and they got the smile on it. And then Joker shows up at the copyright office, and truly an insane character. He's just a madman. That's what makes him great. He's one of the reasons, to me, one of the reasons Joker is Batman's greatest villain is because he's this chaos in Batman's life that he's trying to bring under control. He just goes nuts. In either case, he comes up to the copyright guy, who looks strangely like the editor of the book, Julia Schwartz, and he tells him that he wants a piece of everything sold to him. Every fish that's sold that's got his face on it, he wants a little piece of it. He wants to make some money because it's got his face on it. Anyway, the guy tells him, the copyright guy tells him, look, it's a natural resource. You can't copyright it. So Joker says he's going to kill him, and then all the fun begins. Batman's got to stop him, and Joker goes nuts. But I wanted to show you another scene here. This one, Steve Englehart, like I said, he did his stories and he left. He was in Europe. He had no idea that everyone was calling this the definitive Batman. But Len Wein, also a big-time guy in comic books for a long time, he picked up the writing reins. But I just wanted to show you this beautiful Marshall Rogers Batman artwork. I mean, this guy was phenomenal. Unfortunately, Marshall Rogers is no longer with us. He's passed away. But the last thing he did before he passed away was they got the team back together, which is very rare. You got the band back together. Steve Englehart wrote this, Marshall Rogers drew it, and Terry Austin inked it. And it's, again, amazing, great writing, amazing artwork. I'm going to be honest and tell you it's not as great as their first run together, but I still recommend this as a good read. It's a very solid read for anyone who's interested. I mean, look at how beautiful this artwork is. It's just amazing to me. So if you're interested in any of this, in either one of these series, I've got links down below. Okay, you can get the books through the links down below. Just take a look at them. They are, and that's it really. That's all I really wanted to say is that this was the definitive Batman for the longest time, and it was because of Steve Englehart and Marshall Rogers, and among my favorite Batman stories. And Batman, of course, being my favorite character. So go ahead, take a look at the links down below. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, share. Please comment. I'd like to hear anything you'd have to say about this. And please share this with somebody who you know who may be trying to get into comic books or possibly haven't read this series yet, don't even know about it. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great day.